Dr. Lisa Martinez knelt in the red dirt of Kepler 442b, her hands shaking as she brushed away centuries of dust from the strange metal object buried beneath the surface. Thing was smooth and curved about the size of a football, and it hummed with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Jake, you need to see this," she called out, her voice barely a whisper in the thin atmosphere. The planet was cold and empty, nothing but rocks and ancient riverbeds that had been dry for millions of years, but this thing, whatever it was very much alive. Captain Jake Sullivan walked over from where he had been checking the landing site. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his days in the military. Now he spent his time exploring dead worlds with a small crew, looking for anything interesting enough to sell back on Earth. He had not expected to find anything like this. "What is it?" Jake asked, kneeling down beside Lisa, the blue light reflected in his eyes, making them look strange and distant. "I think it's some kind of beacon," Lisa said. She was the smartest person Jake knew, and if she looked worried, that usually meant trouble. "It's sending out signals, really old signals, but they're still active." Beacon sat between them like a sleeping animal. Lisa pulled out her scanner and ran it over the surface. The readings made her frown. "Jake, this thing has been broadcasting for over 300 years. Non-stop. The power source is something I've never seen before." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. 300 years was a long time for anything to keep working, especially out here in the middle of nowhere. "Can you figure out what it's saying?" Lisa plugged her scanner into the beacon. The blue light grew brighter, and suddenly the air around them filled with sound. It was not human sound, more like singing mixed with the noise water makes when it moves. But underneath all that, Jake could hear something else: fear, pain, desperation. The translation came through Lisa's computer in a flat electronic voice, but the words hit them like a punch to the gut. "To anyone who can hear this message, we are the authority of the Waterworld Shelnith. Our people are dying. The Drather came from the void 3 cycles ago and took our home. They killed our young. They poisoned our waters. They made slaves of those who lived. We fight from the deep places, but we are few and they are many. If there is kindness left in the galaxy, if there are those who hear our words and feel our pain, please help us. We cannot hold much longer. Our children hide in the dark trenches while monsters swim in our sacred pools. This message will repeat until our last breath leaves our bodies, or until someone answers our call." The message ended and then started again from the beginning. The same words, the same desperate hope playing over and over for 3 centuries. Lisa stared at the beacon with tears in her eyes. "They're still out there, Jake. After all this time, they're still fighting." Jake stood up slowly. His mind was racing. The Drather were bad news. Everyone in the galaxy knew that. They were the reason most species stayed close to home and never ventured too far into unknown space. They conquered worlds for sport and turned peaceful people into slaves. The Galactic Federation was scared of them. Hell, Earth's military was scared of them. "We need to get this back to the ship," Jake said. "Earth needs to know about this." The journey back to their research vessel, the New Dawn, took 2 hours. Beacon never stopped broadcasting its message. Lisa tried to turn down the volume, but somehow the words seemed to get louder, more urgent, as if the thing knew it had finally found someone to listen. Their ship was small but fast, designed for long trips to places where no one else wanted to go. Jake's crew was just 5 people, all of them running from something back on Earth. That was fine. With him, people who had nothing to lose made the best explorers. Once they were in space, Jake sent the message to Earth using the fastest communication channel he could afford. It would take 3 weeks for the signal to reach home, but he knew it would cause a stir when it arrived. What he did not expect was the response that came back. Just 5 days later, Admiral Karen White appeared on the main screen of the New Dawn, her uniform crisp and her face serious. Jake had served under her years ago, back when he still believed in following orders and fighting the good fight. "Captain Sullivan," she said, "we've received your transmission. The beacon you found is not the only one. Similar devices have been appearing all over human space. They're old, very old, but they're all broadcasting the same message." Jake felt his stomach drop. If the beacons were showing up everywhere, that meant the Althari had been calling for help for 3 centuries, and no one had answered. "Admiral, are we going to do anything about it?" Jake asked. Karen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. "The situation is complicated, Captain. The Althari home world is deep in Drather space. Any rescue mission would be suicide. The Federation has already made it clear they won't get involved. So we just ignore it." "That's not what I said." Karen leaned forward. "Bring that beacon to Earth, Captain. There are people here who need to hear that message." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. Lisa walked into the bridge carrying 2 cups of coffee. "How did she take it?" "She wants us to bring the beacon home." "That's good, right?" Jake was not sure. He had seen that look in Karen's eyes before, back during the war. It was the look she got right before she did something that would probably get them all killed, but might just save the day. 3 weeks later, the New Dawn in Earth's solar system. Jake had been expecting a normal landing, maybe a few scientists waiting to examine the beacon. What he found instead was chaos. The orbital stations around Earth were buzzing with activity. Military ships that had been mothballed for years were being pulled out of storage. Recruitment offices that had been empty were suddenly packed with volunteers, and, strangest of all, ships were arriving from all over human space, not just military ships but private vessels, mercenary craft, and ships that Jake was pretty sure were not supposed to exist. Dr. Alan Foster met them at the landing pad. He was a thin man with worried eyes who worked for the government, studying alien politics and trying to keep Earth from starting wars it could not win. "Captain Sullivan," Foster said as they unloaded the beacon, "I hope you realize what you've done. I sent a message to Earth Command. That's what I'm supposed to do." Foster laughed, but it was not a happy sound. That message didn't just go to Earth Command, it went everywhere. Every human in the galaxy has heard it by now. "Do you know what they're calling it?" Jake shook his head. "The call." Foster watched as workers carefully loaded the beacon onto a transport vehicle. 300 years ago someone asked for help, and now Earth is answering. The problem is the people who are answering aren't the ones you'd expect. "What do you mean?" Foster looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in close. "The worst of humanity, Captain. The soldiers who were too Violent for the military, the criminals, who were too dangerous for prison. Outcasts who were too strange for society, they're all coming home and they all want to help the Alari. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with Earth's weather. That's insane, maybe. Foster said, but the Drather. Like wildfire, God help us all. Every ship, every space station, every colony. World heard the message. But the response was not what anyone expected. Commander Roy Jackson sat in a bar on Asteroid Colony 7, staring at the bottom of his whiskey glass. The place was a dump full of miners and drifters who had nowhere else to go. Roy fit right in. 3 years ago he had been one of Earth's best military officers. Now he was just another drunk hiding from his past. The bartender, a fat man with metal teeth, turned up the volume on the old television in the corner. The news was talking about the Althari again. Roy had heard the message a dozen times already, but something about it made him listen every time. The Galactic Federation says they won't help, the news reporter was saying. They claimed the Drather are too dangerous to fight. But sources inside Earth Command say that humans are already preparing for war. Roy laughed, but it was a bitter sound. War, right? Like they'd want me back. A woman at the other end of the bar looked up from her drink. She was small and dark with scars on her hands and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. Roy recognized her type. Military, former military like him. You're Roy Jackson. She said. It was not a question, maybe. Who's asking? The woman walked over and sat down next to him. Sergeant Nina Rodriguez, I know what you did during the Titan mining wars, the way you held Station 12 against 1,000 pirates with just 50 men. Roy's jaw tightened. I also know what got me kicked out. Excessive force, they called it. Unnecessary violence, they didn't like. My methods, your methods saved lives. Tell that to the court-martial board. Na leaned closer. The Althai need help. The kind of help that nice, clean soldiers can't give them. They need people like us, people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty or dime. Looked at her for a long moment. Even if that were true, Earth Command would never take us back. We're damaged goods. Nah. Smiled, and Roy saw something dangerous in her expression. Who said anything about Earth Command across the galaxy? Similar conversations were happening everywhere humans lived. In the dark corners of space stations, in the bars where mercenaries gathered, in the hidden places where Earth outcasts made their homes. Dr. Helen Carter received the message while working alone in her laboratory on Europa. She had been in exile for 6 years, ever since her weapons designs were banned by the Geneva Convention. The politicians called her work inhumane and a crime against nature. Helen called it effective. She listened to the Althari message 3 times, then walked to her sealed vault where she kept her most dangerous creations. The weapons inside could kill in ways that would give normal people nightmares, but Helen was not normal people, and the Drather were not normal enemies. Her communication screen lit up with an incoming message. The face that appeared was scarred and weathered with cold blue eyes and gray hair. Helen recognized him immediately. Commander Pete Morrison. She said, I heard you were dead. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Pete said with a grin that showed too many teeth. I've got a proposition for you, Doctor. My unit is putting together a little expedition. We could use Someone with your particular talents. Helen looked at the weapons vault behind her, then back at Pete's scarred face. What kind of expedition? The kind where we answer a cry for help that's been going out for 300 years. The kind where we show the galaxy what happens when you mess with innocent people. The kind where we don't ask permission or wait for orders. Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, and it was not a nice smile. When do we leave? Meanwhile, in the deepest parts of space, something else was stirring. Captain Amy Stone had not set foot on solid ground in 15 years. She and her crew lived in the void between stars, moving through space like ghosts. They called themselves the Void Walkers, and they were probably the most dangerous humans alive. Amy floated in the zero gravity of her ship's bridge, her body moving with the fluid grace of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to have weight. Her crew was scattered around her, all of them pale and thin from years in space. They looked more like aliens than humans. Now Captain, her communications officer, said, "We're getting reports from all over human space. Something big is happening." Amy listened to the Alari message with the same expression she used for everything else, cold and distant. But when it was over, something changed in her eyes. "How long to reach Earth?" she asked. 3 weeks if we push the engines." Push them? Amy's voice was soft, but her crew knew better than to argue and send a message to the other Void Walker ships. Tell them it's time to come home. Back on Earth, the situation was getting out of control. Admiral Corinne White stood in the Situation Room, watching reports come in from across human space. The screen showed ship movements, communication intercepts, and intelligence reports that made her stomach turn. "They're all coming back," Dr. Foster said, standing beside her. "Every exile, every outcast, every person we threw away because they were too dangerous or too violent or too strange. They're all heading for Earth." Corinne nodded grimly. She had expected something like this, but the scale was beyond anything she had imagined. How many were not sure. Maybe 10,000. Maybe more. Some of these people we didn't even know they were still alive. On the main screen, a report was playing about Pete Morrison and his mercenary unit Hell's Angels. The reporter was calling them war criminals and psychopaths. Corinne knew better. They were soldiers who had been asked to do impossible things, and when they succeeded, they were punished for being too good at it. "Admiral," a young officer called out, "we're getting a transmission from the Centauri Coalition. Ambassador Zarthel wants to speak with you." Corinne sighed. The Century were humanity's closest allies in the Galactic Federation, but they were also worried about what Earth might do next. "Put him through." The alien that appeared on screen was tall and thin with blue skin and large black eyes. Zarthel had been dealing with humans for 20 years, but he still looked nervous whenever he talked to them. "Admiral White," Zarthel said in his careful, formal way, "the Coalition is concerned about the reports we are hearing. There are rumors that humanity is planning to attack the Drather Empire. We're considering all options." "Ambassador, the Drather control 50 star systems. They have a fleet of over 1,000 ships. Any attack against them would be suicide." Corinne looked at the reports on her desk. Ships full of humanity's worst nightmares, all heading for Earth, all wanting to help people they had never met, who lived on a world they would probably never see. Yushi said finally, you don't understand. Humans very well do use Zaral's lar. Eyes blinked slowly. I believe I understand them quite well. They are aggressive and unpredictable, but they are not suicidal. About that last part turned to look at the main screen where more reports were coming in. Another ship full of exiles. Another group of outcasts heading home. Humans will do suicidal things for people they love, but the really scary part is what they'll do for people they've never met. I do not understand. Karen smiled, but it was not a happy expression. 300 years ago, someone asked for help. Now the monsters are coming home, and they're all asking the same question. When do we leave? Zul was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very small. What have you done? We've done nothing, Ambassador. But our outcasts, our exiles, are broken and dangerous people. They've decided to answer a cry for help, and when humans decide to help someone, the galaxy tends to notice. The transmission ended, leaving Karen alone with her thoughts in the growing certainty that everything was about to change. Outside her window she could see ships arriving in Earth orbit, dark ships, unmarked ships, ships that officially did not exist. The monsters were coming home, and they were ready for war. The human fleet moved through space like a pack of hunting wolves. 30 ships, all painted black, all running silent through the void. They were not the bright, clean vessels that other species used for war. These ships looked dangerous even when they were standing still. Admiral Karen White stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching the star charts that showed their position deep in Drathor space. They had been traveling for 6 weeks using routes that did not appear on any official maps. The Void Walkers had guided them through paths between the stars that most people did not even know existed. 2 hours to the Alari system. Captain Amy Stone reported. Her pale face glowed in the light from the navigation screens. After 15 years in space, she moved like she was swimming, even in artificial gravity. Drathor patrols are heavy, but we can avoid them. Karen nodded. The plan was simple in theory. Get to the Alari home world, find the survivors, and get them out. The problem was that the Drathor had been occupying the planet for 300 years. They would not give it up without a fight. In the ship's weapon bay, Dr. Helen Carter was making final adjustments to her creations. The devices looked innocent enough, like metal boxes with blinking lights, but Karen knew better. Each one could kill in ways that would make hardened soldiers sick to their stomachs. How are the new toys working? Karen asked. Helen looked up from her work. Her hands were steady, but there was something wild in her eyes. The harmony disruptors will turn their own shields against them. The mercy killers will end fights before they start. The Drathor won't know what hit them. Will they work underwater? Admiral, they'll work in the vacuum of space underwater or inside black hole. The Drathor made a mistake when they decided to hurt innocent people 3 decks below. Commander Roy Jackson was briefing his assault team. These were men and women who had been kicked out of every military in human space. They were too violent, too aggressive, too willing to do whatever it took to win. In other words, they were exactly what this mission needed. The Althari are hiding in the deep ocean trenches, Roy explained, pointing to a holographic map of the alien world. The Drathor built their cities on the surface and in the shallow seas. Our job is to get down there and make contact with the resistance. Sergeant Nina Rodriguez raised her hand. What about the Drather forces? Roy's smile was not pleasant. We go through them. The team laughed, but it was not a happy sound. These people had been fighting wars for most of their lives. They knew what going through enemy forces meant. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fleet, Commander Pete Morrison was having his own meeting with Hells Angels. His mercenary unit was smaller than the others, but they had a reputation that reached across the galaxy. When Hells Angels showed up, people died and buildings burned. The Drather think they're tough, Pete told his team. They've been bullying peaceful species for centuries. Time to show them what real monsters look like. His second in command, a scarred woman named Lieutenant Carol Baker, looked at the battle plans. This is going to be messy. Pete, good. Messy scares them. Clean and professional they can handle, but when we start using their own ships as weapons and turning their equipment into death traps, that's when they realize they're not fighting normal people anymore. As the fleet approached the Alari system, they encountered their first Drather patrol, 5 ships, sleek and powerful, designed to intimidate anyone who might cause trouble. The patrol leader, Subcommander Krex, had been guarding the sector for 10 years. Nothing interesting ever happened here. Then his sensors detected the human ships, unknown vessels. Craig's broadcast, you are entering restricted Drather space. Identify yourselves immediately or face destruction. The response came from Captain Amy Stone. Her voice was cold and distant, like she was talking about the weather. This is Captain Stone of the human fleet. We're here for the Alari. Craig's laughed. Humans were weak creatures who always back down when faced with superior force. Turn around now or we will destroy you. No, the simple word hit cracks like a physical blow. In 10 years of patrol duty, no one had ever just said no to him. You have 10 seconds to comply. Counter offer. Amy's voice came back. You have 5 seconds to run. Craig's was still trying to figure out what that meant when his ship started exploding. The Void Walkers attacked like ghosts made of metal and fury. Their ships moved in ways that defied physics, twisting through space without regard for the laws that governed normal vessels. They did not just destroy the Drather patrol, they made it disappear, leaving nothing but empty space and floating debris. The whole fight lasted 30 seconds. Well, Karen said, watching the tactical display. So much for staying hidden. It was never going to last long anyway. Amy replied, the Drather will know we're here within the hour, but by then we'll be in the ocean. The Althari home world was a beautiful blue marble covered endless seas. From space it looked peaceful and serene, but Karen knew that beneath those calm waters a war had been going on for 3 centuries. Human ships entered the atmosphere like falling stars. The Drather had built massive floating cities on the ocean surface, connected by bridges and platforms that stretched for miles. It was an impressive sight, but Karen felt sick looking at it. Each platform represented decades of oppression and suffering. Incoming transmission from the surface, the communications officer reported, it's the Drather garrison. Commander put him through. The face that appeared on screen was reptilian and cruel, with small black eyes and a mouthful of sharp teeth. General Escatter had been running the occupation of this world for 50 years. and he had never faced a serious challenge. I am General Esseter of the Drather Empire, the alien said. You will surrender immediately, or we will destroy every human ship in this system. Karen looked at the general with the same expression she might use for something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. General, my name is Admiral Karen White. I'm here to pick up some friends of mine. You can either get out of our way, or you can try to stop us. Either choice is fine with me. Narrowed, you dare threaten the Drather Empire? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just explaining your options. The transmission ended with Esseter hissing something that probably was not polite. Karen turned to her tactical officer. What are we looking at down there? 50,000 Drather troops, maybe more. Underwater cities, heavy weapons. Platforms, orbital defense systems. They've turned this place into a fortress. Karen nodded. Good. Fortresses are just traps when the enemy gets inside. The first assault began with Hell's Angels doing what they did best, causing chaos. Pete Morrison's ships dove toward the floating cities like missiles, but instead of crashing, they landed on the platforms and discouraged teams of soldiers who started blowing things up. But these were not normal explosions. Dr. Carter's weapons turned Drather equipment against itself. Shield generators became bombs. Communication arrays became weapons. Even the lights in the corridors became deadly. The Drather had never seen anything like it. Their own technology was killing them, and they did not understand how or why. What are these humans doing? General demanded, watching his forces fall apart. His aide, a younger Drather named Captain Yex, looked at the battle. Reports with growing horror. They're not fighting like any species we know. General, they're using our own weapons against us. They're turning our cities into death traps. Meanwhile, Roy Jackson's assault teams were diving into the ocean in armored suits that let them breathe underwater. The Drather had built cities in the shallow seas, but they were not comfortable in the deep water where the Alari lived. That was humanity's advantage. The first contact with the Alari resistance came when Roy's team was attacked by what they thought were Drather forces. Attackers moved through the water like dolphins, but their weapons were primitive spears and nets. Hold your fire, Roy shouted over the comm system. These might be the good guys. The lead attacker was a creature that looked like a cross between a dolphin and a person, with smooth blue skin and large dark eyes. It spoke in the singing language that Roy had heard on the beacon. The translation came through his suit. Computer, who are you? Why do you come to the deep places? Roy pulled off his helmet, showing his human face to the water. It was a stupid thing to do. If his suit failed, he would drown in seconds, but it was also the kind of gesture that said more than words ever could. We heard your message, Roy said. We came to help. The Althari stared at him for a long moment, then it began to sing, and the sound was full of hope and wonder, and 3 centuries of desperate prayers finally answered. The waters carry your words to all who listen, the Alari said. The deep dwellers have waited so long for this day. You are the ones who answer the call that echoes through the void. Yes, Roy said simply. We're here to take you home. The war for the Alari home world had been going on for 3 days, and General Essar was losing his mind. His reports to the Drather High Command made no sense, even to him. Human soldiers who fought underwater like they were born there, ships that appeared and disappeared without warning, weapons that turned Drather technology into instruments of death. They fight like demons, told his officers during an emergency meeting. Half of his command staff was missing, killed by humans who seemed to appear out of nowhere. They show no fear of death. They use tactics that make no sense, and they keep getting stronger. Captain Yex, one of the few surviving officers, looked at the battle reports. General, they destroyed Platform 7 by turning our own fusion reactor into a bomb. Platform 12 was evacuated after they somehow made the water recycling system produce poison gas, and Platform 3 just vanished, the entire structure. We don't know how they did it, slammed his clawed fist on the table. Impossible, no species fights like this. Maybe that's why they're winning, Yex said quietly, far below the ocean surface. Sergeant Nena Rodriguez moved through the underwater ruins of an ancient Althari city. Her powered armor let her swim like a fish, and the weapons built into her suit could kill anything that got in her way. But the most dangerous thing about Nena was not her equipment, it was her mind. She had studied the Drather occupation for weeks, learning how they thought and how they fought. Now she was using that knowledge to tear their empire apart from the inside. Target acquired, she whispered into her comm unit. Ahead of her, a Drather underwater base sat like a metal tumor. On the ocean floor, inside that base, were computers that controlled the occupation forces across 3 sectors. Nad did not attack the base directly. Instead, she found the power cables that fed it and planted one of Dr. Carter's special devices. The Harmony Disruptor would turn the base's own power system into a weapon that would destroy everything electronic within a 50 mi radius. Bomb set, Nina reported. 30 seconds to detonation. She swam away quickly. Behind her, the Drather base lit up like a small stair, then went dark forever. On the surface, Commander Roy Jackson led his assault team through the burning remains of Platform 15. The Drather defenders were falling back, but they were not running, they were retreating to stronger positions, preparing for a final stand. Roy did not mind. He had been fighting wars his entire adult life, and he knew that cornered enemies could be the most dangerous, but he also knew that humans were very good at doing impossible things when innocent people needed help. Movement ahead, one of his soldiers reported. Looks like a heavy weapons team. Roy smiled. Good. I was starting to get bored. The Drather position was well defended with energy shields and automatic weapons covering every approach. A normal attack would cost dozens of human lives, but Roy's team was not normal, and they did not make normal attacks. Instead of charging the position, they surrounded it and started making noise, lots of noise. They played music, shouted insults in the Drather language, and set off explosions that did no real damage but made the defenders nervous. What are they doing? The Drather squad leader asked his men. Maybe they are trying to frighten us. The squad leader laughed. Foolish humans, we are Drather, we do not know fear. That was when Roy's real attack began. While the defenders were focused on the noise in front of them, Nena's team came up from below. Through the ocean floor itself, they had been digging tunnels for 2 days using mining equipment they had stolen from a Drather supply depot. The first thing the defenders knew about the real attack was when the floor beneath their feet exploded. Meanwhile, in the deepest Parts of the ocean, Dr. Lisa Martinez was working with the Alari resistance. Leader Keeper Shellandros, Lisa had been studying the alien language and culture, trying to understand how the Althari had survived 3 centuries of occupation. Shallandros was old, even by Alari standards. His skin was scarred from battles with Drathar forces, and his voice carried the weight of too many lost friends, but his eyes still burned with hope, especially now that the humans had arrived. Your people fight with great skill, Shellandro told Lisa through the translation device, but the Drathar have many more ships coming, we have heard. Their messages, reinforcements from across the Empire. Lisa nodded. They had expected this. The Drathar could not allow their first major defeat to go unanswered. If they lost here, other occupied worlds might start thinking about rebellion. How many ships? Lisa asked. Perhaps 1,000, maybe more. They will arrive within days. Lisa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold ocean water. The human fleet had 30 ships. Even with their superior tactics and Dr. Carter's weapons, they could not fight 1,000 Drathar vessels and win. Keeper Lisa said carefully, we might have to evacuate your people, get them to safety before the reinforcements arrive. Shallandro was quiet for a long moment. Around them, young Althari swam in circles, playing games that had been passed down for generations. They were the first generation to play those games in 300 years, because for the first time in their lives they were not afraid. Dr. Martinez, Shellandro said finally, do you know why we never gave up hope? Tell me. Because the deep places taught us that life always finds a way. No matter how dark it gets, no matter how hopeless things seem, life always finds a way to survive and grow stronger. He gestured toward the young Aluri. Look at them, they are playing games. They learned from stories their grandparents told them, games that have not been played since the occupation began. Lisa watched the children swim and play, and she understood this was not just about defeating the Drathar. This was about giving a people their culture back, their hope back, their future back. We won't abandon you, she said. I know you will not. That is why the deep places sent you to us. Back on the command ship, Admiral Corinne White was looking at reports that made her stomach hurt. The Drathar reinforcement fleet was massive, bigger than anything humanity had ever faced. But what worried her more were the reports from Earth. The Galactic Federation was putting pressure on the human government to abandon the mission. Several allied species were threatening to cut diplomatic ties if Earth continued its aggressive actions in Drathar space. Politicians back home were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about unauthorized military operations. Admiral Captain Amy Stone said, appearing on the bridge like a ghost, we need to talk. Corinne followed Amy to a private meeting room. The Void Walker captain moved like she was swimming through air, and her pale skin seemed to glow in the artificial light. The Federation is going to try to stop us, Amy said without preamble. They're sending ships to cut off our retreat. How do you know this? Amy smiled, but it was not a nice expression. The Void hears all secrets, Admiral. The Federation thinks they can force us to abandon the Alari by trapping us here. Corinne felt a cold anger building in her chest. Politicians playing games while people died. It was the same story that had been going on for centuries. What do You recommend, Captain, we finish this fast before the Federation arrives, before the Drather reinforcements get here. We hurt the Drather so badly that they never want to see another human as long as they live. And how do we do that? Amy's smile got wider and more dangerous. We show them what real monsters look like. That night, General received a message that changed everything. The human fleet was not retreating. Instead, they were doing something that no sane military force had ever attempted. They were diving deeper into Drather space, heading for the main supply depot that fed the entire occupation force. They must be insane, Captain Yak said, reading the intelligence reports. That depot is defended by 100 ships and orbital weapons platforms. SR stared at the star charts, trying to understand what the humans were thinking. The supply depot was the heart of Drather operations in this sector. If it fell, the occupation of dozens of worlds would collapse. Send a message to High Command. Qatar ordered. Tell them the humans are not just trying to rescue the Althari, they are trying to destroy us. The message was sent, but it was already too late. In the deep void between stars, 30 human ships moved like hunting wolves toward their prey. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never been defeated, but they were also angry, and humans were very dangerous. When they were angry, behind them the Alari sang songs of hope that had not been heard for 3 centuries. Ahead of them, the Drather prepared for a battle that would decide the fate of an empire. And in the darkness between the stars, Earth's monsters prepared to show the galaxy what happened when you hurt innocent people. The Drather supply depot hung in space like a metal moon, surrounded by 100 warships and enough firepower to destroy a planet. High Admiral Grawl commanded the station personally, and he had never lost a battle in 40 years of conquest. Now he stood in his command center, watching long-range sensors that showed 30 small human ships approaching through the void. The humans were still 3 hours away, moving at maximum speed toward what could only be their deaths. Are they really going to attack us? His aide asked, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. Grawl laughed. Let them come. We will destroy them all, and then we will hunt down every human in the galaxy. They will learn what happens when lesser species challenge the Drather Empire. But Admiral Corinne White had not come this far to lose. As the human fleet approached the depot, she opened a channel to all ships. Her voice was calm and steady, the voice of someone who had made peace with what came next. This is Admiral White to all vessels. In 5 minutes we will engage the enemy. Some of us won't be going home, but everyone in this fleet volunteered to be here. And we all know why we came. 300 years ago someone asked for help. Today we answer that call. On the bridge of her ship, Captain Amy Stone prepared for the most dangerous maneuver of her life. The Void Walkers had been practicing it in secret, using gravitational fields and engine overloads to create something that had never been tried in combat. All Void Walker ships prepare for slingshot protocol, Amy announced. Her pale hands moved over controls that most people could not even understand. We get one chance at this. The battle began when the Drather opened fire at maximum range. Energy beams that could cut through mountains reached out toward the human ships, but the beams hit empty space. The human vessels were no longer where they appeared to be. Impossible. Grawl roared. Where did they go? The answer came from everywhere at once. The human ships had split up, using the depot's own gravitational field to sling themselves around the station at impossible speeds. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts striking at weak points that should have been protected. Commander Pete Morrison and Hell's Angels hit the depot's main reactor complex, but instead of trying to destroy it, they captured it. Within minutes, Pete's team had turned the station's own power source into the largest bomb in galactic history. Station reactor is now under our control, Pete reported with grim satisfaction. If they try to stop us, we blow it all up. If they don't try to stop us, we still blow it all up. Meanwhile, Dr. Helen Carter's weapons were turning the Drather's advantages into weaknesses. The Harmony disruptors made their shields collapse inward. The Mercy killers turned their communication systems into weapons that killed anyone who tried to use them, but the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. Sergeant Nina Rodriguez had infiltrated the depot's computer core, and she was not trying to destroy it, she was rewriting it. Now, what are you doing? Roy Jackson asked over the comm system as he led his assault team through the station's corridors. Changing the rules, Nena replied, her fingers flying over alien control panels. The Drather have been using this depot to coordinate the occupation of 50 worlds, all their supply lines, all their troop movements. All their orders come through here, and now they're going to get some new orders across the Drather Empire. Garrison commanders received messages that made no sense. Orders to withdraw from occupied worlds, instructions to release all prisoners, commands to destroy their own weapons and surrender to local resistance forces. Most of the commanders ignored the orders, thinking they were mistakes, but some obeyed because the messages came with proper authorization codes and carried the authority of High Admiral Grawl himself. On dozens of worlds, confused Drather soldiers began abandoning their posts. Supply ships changed course, heading away from combat zones. Weapons depots exploded as their own security systems turned against them. But Grawl had one last card to play. Deep in the depot's core was a weapon that the Drather had never used, a fusion device powerful enough to destroy everything within a light-year radius. If he could not defeat the humans, he would take them with him. Activate the Omega Protocol, Grawl ordered. His aides stared at him in horror. High Admiral, that will destroy our own fleet as well. Better that than let these monsters escape to tell others that the Drather can be defeated. The fusion device began its activation sequencer. In 10 minutes it would explode with the force of a star going nova. The blast would kill everyone in the system, Drather, human, and the billions of innocent people on nearby worlds. That was when Captain Amy Stone made her final play. All Void Walker ships execute slingshot protocol now. She ordered what happened next would become legend across the galaxy. The Void Walker ships used their engines to create a gravitational anomaly, a pocket of twisted space-time that grabbed the fusion device like a giant hand. Then they slung it away from the depot, away from the inhabited worlds toward the empty darkness between stars. But the maneuver required the Void Walker ships to stay behind, their engines overloading from the strain. Amy Stone and her crew would not be leaving the system alive. Amy, get out of there. Admiral White shouted over the comm. Amy's voice came back calm and steady. Can't do it, Admiral. Someone has to. Make sure this thing goes off safely. Tell Earth that the void remembers its own. The fusion device exploded in the darkness between stars, creating a light show that could be seen from 100 systems. When the glare faded, the void walker ships were gone, but so was the weapon that would have killed billions. High Admiral Grawl stared at the empty space where his ultimate weapon had been. What did they do? What did they do? They saved everyone, Admiral White said, appearing on his communication screen, including you. Grawl's command center was surrounded by human soldiers. Roy Jackson stood behind the alien Admiral, his weapon pointed at Grawl's head. The battle was over and they Drather had lost. This is Admiral White. To all Drather forces, Karen announced. On all frequencies, your command structure is gone. Your supply lines are cut. Your empire is falling apart. You have one choice: surrender now or we keep fighting until there's nothing left of you. The surrender came within hours. Across 50 star systems, Drather forces laid down their weapons and waited for the humans to decide their fate. Most expected to be executed or enslaved, because that was what the Drather would have done. Instead, the humans surprised everyone again. They let the Drather go home with a simple message: don't come back. 6 months later, Admiral Karen White stood on the surface of the Alari home world, watching children play in pools that had been cleansed of 3 centuries of poison. The water was clean again, the cities were rebuilt, and the Alari were free. Dr. Lisa Martinez walked up beside her carrying a tablet with reports from across the galaxy. The Federation wants to give us medals, she said. Karen laughed. What about sanctions and condemnation for unauthorized military action? That was before. Now they're calling us heroes. Funny how victory changes people's opinions. And the Alari, Lisa smiled. They want to build a monument for the humans who answered their call, especially for Captain Stone and the Void Walkers. Karen looked up at the sky, where a new star blazed where the fusion device had exploded. The Althari called it the human light, and they said it would burn for 1,000 years. What will the inscription say? Karen asked. When the innocent called, the monsters answered. Across the galaxy, other species had heard the story of what happened in Drather space, how Earth's outcasts and exiles had defeated an empire that had never known defeat, how humanity's monsters had become its greatest heroes, and on worlds where the strong oppress the weak, people began to whisper a new hope. Maybe the humans will come for us too. Back on Earth, recruitment offices reported record numbers of volunteers, not just from Earth but from across the galaxy. Outcasts and misfits and people who had nowhere else to go, all wanting to join the force that had become known as Earth's Guardians. Admiral White returned to her office to find a new message waiting on her desk. Another distress beacon, another cry for help from somewhere in the unexplored regions of space. She looked at the message for a long moment, then opened a channel to every human ship in the galaxy. Attention all vessels, she said. This is Admiral White. We have a new mission. Someone needs our help. The response came back immediately from 1,000 different voices. Message received. We're on our way.